Savania. The Orders of Erasure, Volume 1. For Emily, whenever I may find her. The Orders of Erasure, a case concerning the Central Intelligence Bureau's plot to eliminate Universe Null Sum 1 from the multiverse without just cause or provocation. Chapter 1. The Dingo. Before he was a god. Tetrasirini's parents hurried the little Dingo toward Luniker's cave. "You're not a cub anymore," his father said. "Time to prove that you're strong enough to join our tribe." Beyond that, they stayed quiet. He had wanted to take along the spear that he had made with his grandfather, but his mother had told him that it would be useless where he was going. Useless, he wondered. Will there not be any fighting? His parents exchanged a knowing glance. "There will be," his mother says, "but you're only allowed your instincts." She helped him out of his clothes as they reached the cave's entrance, while his father said, "The path ahead is difficult, Tetra, and only great warriors return to us." Together they push him into the darkness. No adult ever talked about what happened inside the cave or the scars they returned with, although sometimes the very old or very drunk would talk about the humans. But those were only stories, right? As the Dingo's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he found that he wasn't in a cave at all. It was more like a tunnel through the mountains. He moved cautiously toward the light ahead of him, sniffing at the odd-smelling air with his hackles raised. His instincts told him to flee, but he would never dishonor his family by returning without scars. When the human grabs him by the scruff, he immediately wanted to kick and bite, but relaxed instead, surrendering himself to his fate. "We got ourselves another young gladiator," the human yells to the others. 2,000 years later. 2 millennia ago, Tetrasirini grew a jungle up around the planet-eating urban cities of Savania, a world where all mammals evolved, in order to protect them from the flesh-eating Carnian tribes who lived outside the god's domain. But still, he couldn't stop some from being eaten. The Scarywig triplets, Sebastian, Franklin, and Victor, were 3 identical muskrats who found that out one night when they decided they wanted to adventure in the jungle. 30 years ago, Tetrasirini let the Karns steal Urbian collar tech, which had curbed the Carnian bloodlust. By introducing it to the herbs first, the Dingo caused all trades to be made through the Savanian banking systems, SBS, as they brokered a tech for resources deal between those inside the jungle and those outside it. Through the caller's net, they sent messages, told stories, exchanged images and videos with each other to keep each other up to date on their worlds. It brought unity to a planet that was divided by the jungle, and now nobody ever had to feel alone. Sebastian was raised on the net, which is why they lied to his dad. The net cred would be worth it. He'd bury himself in the net after they found out why their father had forbidden jungle exploration. Although the callers could control most of the Karn's murderous urges, they weren't always 100% effective, since all technology can break down from time to time. Especially when you're a tiger on the run from the jaguars you'd stolen it from. The tiger, in an attempt to evade their tracking devices, had taken off his collar and had discarded it as soon as he reached the jungle. His trip was unplanned, so for the last 10 days he'd eat nothing but snakes and bugs. The triplets had only wanted to find out the truth about the jungle, and did when they ran into the tiger. His instincts took over before he even knew what he was doing, the tiger leaping from the shadows and tearing Franklin into bloody pieces in front of his brothers. It wasn't the world that Tetrasirini wanted for the muskrat kits, but it was much better than when he had first arrived on Savania. At that time, the herbs were the main food source for the Karns, so some were only getting eaten once in a while was an improvement, even if it still was tragic. Part 3. Today. Sure, I know how to get into Tetrasirini's sacred grove. Yosef, the fluffy white and orange cat, lies to Spatina, a gangly teenage giraffe. Good. Tonight. You know that it's in the jungle, right? The cat asks carefully. We're going into the jungle? Sebastian Sigarywig butts in. That'd be great for our board. The Cat and the Muskrat moderated a semi-popular online forum that investigated conspiracies, the newest trend being a connection between the Dingo god and a shadow human government. Spatina groans inwardly. This is not something she needed posted to the net. They lived in Viton, the urban union's capital. She was the mayor's daughter, and her father would have an aneurysm if he found out. She had been in the spotlight for most of her life, and not a day went by where she did not wish for the type of anonymity the boys had. Don't worry, we'll keep you out of the edit, Yosef says as they leave the school. Sebastian is going to be on camera most of the time anyway. Spatina smiles. Okay, guys, I'll meet you both tonight at the park. Sebastian holds a bag of fried clams out to Yosef as they walk together toward the Scarywig's house. You think I can get you to look at Dad's boat? They both knew the cat was going to, and Yosef grabs a pot full of clams, crunching them as they walk. Dude, Sebastian continues, do you know what kind of numbers we're going to get if we question the Dingo himself? Part 4. His youth. Tetrasirini was well aware that he wasn't actually a deity. He had been born like any other animal in the Lunacarnian timeline and had been offered as a sacrifice to the humans in Coliseum because it was the only thing that kept peace between the two worlds. The humans only wanted the Lucarian young so they could train them in hand-to-hand combat for the entertainment of a large, paying audiences. The owners were fully aware of their sentience, but it was a secret they chose to keep from their fans. The men and the animals never spoke in public. Each of the gladiators told them that some of their winnings were used for housing and feeding costs, but also showed them a stockpile of goods they were storing up for them when they returned home. The harder you fight, the more you get at retirement, they said. Following the rules was easy. They were celebrities in Coliseum, fighting each other to the death every weekend. The Dingo's swiftness had made him brutal. He knew that the humans could be trusted because everyone's parents and grandparents had come back from the cave tough and strong. The other gladiators, who were just trying to make it to retirement, warned Tetrasirini to pace himself because the humans weren't known to be as generous as they claimed to be. The Dingo couldn't care less. He was there for the adrenaline rush of the fight. They were aware that each of their matches could be their last, whether it was due to death or severe dismemberment. Irrevocably injured Lunacarians were rarely put back in the ring, if they didn't recover, being made to limp their way back through the cave. No matter how injured they were, everyone in the animals wanted to make it home. They were a signal to their people that the humans needed a replacement. Tetrasirini's parents were obligated to take him to the cave when the gladiator's family found them. They had to comply under Lunacarian law. When his parents were younger, a few had dared to defy this order, warning to protect their young, but soon the humans came themselves, wiping out entire villages as retribution. The reminder was heeded afterwards, and they kept offering their children. Those who did well in the games were rewarded, but they returned nonetheless to their barren desert world. Resources were scarce, and there were constant skirmishes between neighboring villages over water or hunting grounds, which is why the animals still look back on their time as gladiators with fondness, no matter how poorly they were treated in Coliseum and how little they earned. The screams of the crowd and their owners as fur flew and the hot smell of blood was in the air was intoxicating, burning brightly in their memories. But they didn't just fear for their lives as gladiators. Even when they were tired, they would still be fighting on a regular basis until something finally killed them. The Coliseum owners may have been stingy, but they did pamper the high-earning Lunacarians. The animals simply had to play their part by showing up for public appearances in the ring, and without their origin, an open secret in the industry. The gladiators were so trained in their silence on the subject of humans that they all silently agreed to keep their children ignorant of their atrocities. They couldn't stop the abductions. Why would they destroy their children's innocence? However, in private conversations, gladiators would sometimes reminisce, but it always brought them back to the question without answer. What were humans? Part 5. The Gladiator. The carcal had Tetrasirini in a headlock, her claws against his furry throat, the crowd screaming outside their cage as she showed off for them. Killing the Dingo was not enough. Their trainers had drilled into them. It also had to be a show. The fight between Coralitha and the Dingo had been one of the most requested in the history of the Collegian Fighting Championship, CFC, and punishment was waiting for the carcal if she wasn't entertaining enough for them. The Dingo didn't want to pass out since he had just glimpsed the human who had haunted his dreams. The Dream Man was very distinctive, being very long, thin, and pale, always wearing dark glasses. He always asked the same question: is this what you're going to do to your kids? The crowd around him was screaming at them for blood, and Coralitha obeyed by digging her claws into Tetrasirini's thickly scarred neck, doing for him the same favor that she hoped she would give her, an unforgettable death. It was honorable to die at the hands of a greater warrior than you. I'll share my bounty and tell your family you died well, she growled at the Dingo, barely moving her mouth. This was the moment that the Dingo was waiting for, his secret that no one who discovered it had lived to share. Remorse was his secret weapon. He played the long game with everyone he ever fought, befriending them during the after-hours meetups. Coralitha's affection made her imperceptibly loosen her grip, allowing him to kick free and continue a match everyone thought was over. He did it because he wanted the fame. How else was he going to stop the Collegians from coming after his kids? The more money he made for his masters, the more freedom he earned. The man from his dreams told him that the Lunacarians like him could be proper Collegian citizens, equal to humans. The crowd's roar was deafening as the Dingo was instantly back on top of his prey, first splitting to the flesh below. Coralitha had put up a good fight, not wanting to disappoint her fans even as her life drained away. Yes, the Dingo felt bad about it, and yes, the faces of everyone he killed haunted his sleep, which is why the Dream Man said the mistreatment had to stop with him. They chose him, the long, thin man said. They would be there to help him lead his people to victory. Part 6. The Agent. Terence Gottlieb, the Thin Man, steps out of an Ixacanan dream machine, adjusting his sunglasses. Griffin, his mission lead, hands him a towel, asking, "Did you get through to the Dingo?" "Looks that way." The agent dries off. He has quite a hero complex. His friend laughs. "There's not a single recruit I know who didn't." Angry Ixacan warriors can be heard approaching the hut where the two agents are hiding, causing Terence and Griffin to dive for cover. Some tattoo guards enter and begin spreading out to find them. The Thin Man reaches into his blazer pocket, and his mission lead hisses harshly at him, "Don't kill them. Sarah Kay cannot find out we were here." Relax, Terence smiles, flinging nano-drones into the air. In no way did they want to upset Sarah Kay, the Bureau's assistant director. They had all studied at the academy together, so if she decided they needed punishment, she knew exactly how to make it hurt. As the nanos land on the approaching men, Terence slowly stands, invisible to them as he speaks plainly. "Good work. All clear," making them turn back. With his glasses, he watches his swarm follow them out. Not only did the guards keep their secret, Terence would make sure that everyone forgot there had even been a mission to find them. The agent's illicit use of the dream machine would be viewed as an act of war, raising the already high political tensions between their worlds. He hoped recruiting the Dingo would be worth the risk. Part 7. The Recruit. Tetrasirini would lay awake at night worrying about the encroaching revolt, but he was more afraid that his children would have to endure this brutal slavery. The Thin Man had said that seeing him would be the signal. As the crowd's roar died down, the Dingo puts his paws over his head and shouts to them, "Friends, thank you all for your support." The gasp that went through the crowd was second only to the silence that followed as every eye bulged at Tetrasirini and every jaw dropped. "We are just like you," he says. "We bleed, we feel pain, and we miss our families back home." The entire stadium erupts as the guards try to rush the cage and the CFC fans try to keep them away from their idols. The Dingo takes the opportunity to run for the locker rooms, wanting to convince his fellow Lunacarnians to join him. He didn't care that they didn't believe his stories of the pale human who visited him in his dreams. "What are you doing, Dr. Trey?" a large red squirrel yelled at the Dingo when he burst in. "I'm only 2 more years away from retirement." She circles him with Dravenir, a small bear, at her shoulder. "They're going to want us to make an example of you." The Dingo crouches into a defensive stance, hearing Grithsari, a large boar, approaching from behind him. A honey badger lunges first at him, Tetrasirini moving even before he's perceived the threat, his jaws drawing blood. He was going to get out of there if he had to kill every single one of them, and they knew it, but that didn't stop them. If they didn't kill the Dingo, they knew the Calesian guards wouldn't have a problem killing each and every one of them. But they hesitated, seeing the Dingo's determined look even as they encircle him. "They keep us in line with our infighting," he says. Trethrir and Luna, TR, twin wolves, pounce on him, snarling, making Tetrasirini dislocate their arms. "I know you don't believe me," the Dingo pants, "but the man from my dreams is here." And the mob erupts in laughter. Terrence rushes in with Griffin right behind him, both of them quickly sizing up the situation. The agents shove their way into the throng, the animals preparing themselves mentally for the punishment that they believe is lying ahead. "I'm here as a representative from the Calesian government," the Griffin says, "and we're only here for the Dingo." Pointing at Terrence, Tetrasirini exclaims, "That's the man from my dreams." "All you had to do was play along, man," Terrence sighs. 2 Calesians march in front of the entrance, yelling, "Kill them all!" "You will be severely outnumbered if we don't help you out," Griffin says to the animals around him, slowly drawing his glowing power sword. Dr. Trey puts her paws on her forehead, slowly shaking her head. "Really, you guys? All I wanted to do was retire in a couple of years." Turning seriously to his friends, the Dingo says, "We all knew we'd die young, either here or at home. Why not secure what we have?" Smiling, Tetrasirini turns to the Calesian security with gladiators and agents behind him. "Wouldn't it be easier if we all just got along?" "Beast, you broke our only rule," one of them says. "Now all of you are officially dead. Go home. You lose your retirement." All the animals in the locker room groan, grumbling to each other as they gather their things. "We don't want to take the Dingo with us," Griffin says, stepping forward to show the guards his credentials. "This is a CIB matter." "I'll pretend you gentlemen aren't aware that the Lucarnians are protected by the central government, making this an illegal operation." Security draws their power swords, and Griffin says to them, "Whoa, guys, I really don't think you want things to go that way." "Central isn't in charge here," one guard says, swinging on the agent. Griffin deflects the Calesian's attack, and Terrence grabs Tetrasirini's arm, dragging him. "Come on," he yells. "We gotta get you out of here." "You get one chance," Griffin says, bending one of the guard's arms behind his back, his power sword at their throats as he speaks to the second Calesian. "It makes no difference to you. Turn him over and forget you ever saw anything." The second guard crouches, putting his sword on the ground, and then stands with his hands raised, which makes Griffin smile. The agent lets the men go and then backs slowly through the milling animals as the guards announce, "Everyone else back to the cave." On the way out the door, Tetrasirini grabs a hooded cloak, putting it on them as they run, the light blinding him as they reach the parking lot. Nobody notices the agents or their companion as the Calesians make their way back to their chariots, murmuring about what they just witnessed. Terrence guides the Dingo to their parking spot, and they lift into the air. "The life we're offering you beats anything you're likely to find back home. We want you to come join the Central Intelligence Bureau," Griffin continues. "We're an agency tasked with managing the multiverse." "If I join, will I be able to go back and help out my fellow Lunicarians?" "Absolutely," Griffin smiles. "We've been cracking down on fight clubs across the planet. Very likely you'll be back here working with these very cases." They land a short while later on the outskirts of Paralis at a food court similar to thousands across the planet. "Have you ever had the starfish skewers here?" Griffin asks Terrace as they climb out of the chariot with the Dingo. "I'll get some for the 3 of us." Tetrasirini smiles to himself. For the first time in his life, a human considered him to be equal to them. "I'll meet you two at the Phoenix Club," Griffin says. "Come on," Terrence says, opening a closet door to step into a hotel room. The noise around the Dingo completely changes as he follows Terrence, the agent closing the door behind them. Heart pounding in his furry chest, he gets the same feeling he had when he had first been scruffed as a cub. Part 8. The God. He never made it back to Lunacar. It was a big part of the reason why the Dingo tried to take such good care of the herbs. They were terrorized by the Karns before he came to Savania, and the despair he felt for them because of his own experience, even if he was now considered the dominant species. His despair had caused the jungle to grow. Within a decade, it had grown so much it encircled Urbian villages and cities. When scientists finally discovered that the Dingo was the reason, they came wanting to influence his power for themselves. When they brought him food and fine clothes, Tetrasirini realized that they revered him as a god. He was their savior, after all, and they had promised to keep bringing him gifts if he could continue protecting them. Both sides thought the agreement would be short-lived since they had counted their lives in terms of years, not decades, each generation becoming more disgruntled with the arrangement with each passing century. The Dingo's legend grew with each retelling, and proof of his power was easily confirmed as the jungle moved at his command, keeping them safe. But few spoke to him, even as they continued paying tribute. He wanted to hear from the Bureau's assistant director and expected that it would happen any day now, but as the centuries passed, he grew doubtful. No one from the Bureau contacted him, so he just kept on. After his first millennium, he spent his time as a recluse, hidden in the jungle grove, waiting. They wouldn't forget about him. Chapter 9. 1 week local time. Sarah Kay, the CIB's assistant director, lies with Griffin on the see-through floors of the Clio, a four-dimensional representation of space-time from every timeline in the multiverse, the display stretching in every direction away from them. "Look," Griffin says, pointing at a blur, "cliodynamically significant." He circles a small spot. The assistant director nods but looks puzzled. He's clearly attracting a divergence, but what? What could turn that Dingo into an originator? "We need to stabilize the world government," she says. "Tell Terrence to have the Dingo pick a Carnian king." "I'm surprised he survived as long as he has," Griffin says. "He's gifted, but I didn't expect immortality. He's invulnerable in his jungle and theoretically could stay there forever." Tetrasirini was respected among the Karns because his magic extended far beyond the jungle, which only enhanced his fighting style. He didn't want to do it that way, but every year, hundreds of Karns challenged his authority over the jungle barrier, and he had to kill both them and their accomplices. For almost 2,000 years, the god made them a deal. If they held a contest, he would recognize their king. The Dingo had wanted to give up many times, but after he'd been on Savania for 1,984.5 years, Terrence finally came. "Oh, wow," was the first thing the agent said, looking like he hadn't aged a day. "How is he so young?" the Dingo thought. "You're doing really good down here," Terrence said to the embedded agent. "Sarah Kay says there's just one more thing we need you to take care of down here." They hadn't forgotten about him, he thought. He was still needed. The huge relief made him willing to do anything for the Bureau. Together they would bring peace back to Savania. It won't be much longer now," Terrence says to the Dingo. "We'll be in touch when we need to move towards integration." And that was how Tetrasirini met Gerald, a lion from Mahalek who won the Carnian Battle Royale, becoming king of the tribes. In the end, he had even challenged the god to a fight. It was a stupid thing for the lion to do, but the Dingo recognized it for what it was, brash courage of the young. Tetrasirini stepped into the ring from the judge's booth, the dirt smell triggering muscle memory from lifetimes ago. The lion quickly recognized his mistake, smiling with an extended paw. Part 10. The King. Gerald of Mahalek hadn't always been strong, but he had always been fast, thinking on his feet as he dodged attacks. What he lacked in strength, he made up in cunning, diffusing fights before they started. His mentor, Tetrasirini, taught him this as a cub. No one had officially seen the Dingo since ancient times because he wanted to ensure that no one recognized him as anything but a carn in the streets. When Terence had told him to choose a king, he looked for the most compassionate carn he could find with the hopes of setting them all straight. The Bureau had sent the Dingo to Savania solely as an observer of its culture, not as an influencer, but early in the first decade after his powers manifested and knowing full well that it was against his directives, he had already stepped in to shape history. His anonymity had been achieved through the jungle monkeys he hired to collect his Urbian tribute, and for centuries they kept the secret for him. Shortly after choosing Gerol to be king, he revealed that he was, in fact, the legendary Dingo, wanting the lion cub to be fully aware of who was backing him up. Tetrasirini also let him know that he didn't care who the carn told, since no one would believe him. Everyone simply believed Gerald's mentor was just a wise old Dingo. He only revealed the truth when he arrived to judge the king's tournament. He had kept his identity hidden from the Karns by killing anyone who breached the jungle, knowing that he wouldn't have the freedom to move about their cities while they viewed him as an enemy. Peace on Savania meant his freedom from the jungle. The king's tournament was a fight to the death, so there was no way for the Dingo to unfairly judge the contest. His fighter was the one who survived. It had taken years of daily practice to train the young cub in the jungle magic that the monkeys had taught him, knowing that the lion had to win. The god never asked the Gerol if he was willing to participate, because the cub wasn't willing, and he would have given up many times if the choice was up to him. Tetrasirini's power scared him, since the Dingo could literally summon thunderclouds on command. The things that the Dingo taught him in those years went far beyond fighting, as the god shared secrets with him that no one would believe about humans who secretly ruled their planet and had set the Dingo to train here. Tetrasirini said the humans had chosen the lion to bring balance to Savania so they could finally make contact. Sometimes that knowledge weighed heavier on him than the training did. Fighting certainly toughened up the lion, but the secrets hardened his heart, isolating him from the Karns around him. His life had a different path. That's not to say that Gerol was unpopular. In fact, he had had fans for his entire life since he had started fighting professionally and before he was even fully grown. He was surrounded by admirers wherever he went, so he befriended them, as the Dingo suggested. Many times Gerol wanted to revolt and tell the Dingo that enough was enough, that the isolation was too great, but instead he quietly shouldered his duty. Further, Tetrasirini reminded him that the lion's increasing fame paid for their food and lodging, raising his family out of the slums where he was born. The lion had everything he'd ever wanted except for someone who could understand him. His only companion was a deity. Everyone else was revered or feared Gerol. Therefore, when he became king, the only thing he'd inherited was a throne of loneliness. Part 9. The foreign exchange student. Once the college had been introduced in Savania, the Karns were allowed into Urbian territory under very strict supervision. Yosef, the cat, was one of those who had been selected for an exchange program, and he was sent as a spy. He ingratiated himself with Sebastian through their interactions in a net game after thoroughly researching him and his entire family. The muskrat was a loner, so he was more than glad to have a friend. Then Yosef started showing his friend and all the memes he had found hacking for the Rakshivan government. The world would soon know what the humans did. Karn squadrons had been getting abducted in the last few years, and the agent needed a fall guy so the leak couldn't be traced back to him. Plus, the muskrat was everything Yosef could want from a rube, since he was a perfect stereotype, living at home, smelly, and overweight. The night the triplets brothers died, their dad put down even stricter boundaries on them, and since the net was just gaining popularity, Sebastian spent all of his time on it. Right away, he started posting Yosef's memes to a netboard /I believe, proof of the humans' interaction with Savania's god. The board's following exploded, garnering millions of daily views. No one suspected the cat, instead believing that the I Believe moderators must be a super hacker, as Yosef leaked more undeniable photographic proof of human interference, all the while keeping the muskrat from blowing their cover. Part 12. The Dingo finally got rest after the life he'd been through. His birth on Lunacar, where everyone fought each other for survival, to Elysian, where he was fighting was for pure entertainment, before being placed on Savania. He trusted the Bureau's callers to care for his surrogate children. He didn't think the Urbians would adapt the device to give them full imaging capabilities, swiftly making the god famous across the planet with undeniable proof of his existence. Tetrasirini gladly let the king steal the limelight, and the Dingo took his first break in 2,000 years. Terrence told him that the Bureau hadn't wanted him to be on the planet for this long, but no one had manifested the degree of power that the Dingo had, so they just left him in. The human agent told him that upstairs were taking bets on how long he'd be able to live for. When they found out that he was running the planet through his generational contacts, they wanted to see what would happen if they mind lock all of Savania. The callers made sense to the Dingo. The human agent told Tetrasirini that it was good to have the upstairs betting on him. It led to promotions. Life on Savania had been brutally long for the Dingo, but he didn't want to stay another day if he could help it. Sure, he knew the Bureau's device was intended as a form of brain control, adjusting chemicals within the population's bodies to make them more malleable. He could see it for what it was: control. And Tetrasirini excused it by telling himself that Savania was Bureau property, so they could do with the timeline whatever they chose to do with it. Terrence said that if the Dingo could pull off this mission, they could both take their leave together at the Phoenix Club. The mission had only lasted a week local time, so the Bureau behaved like the Dingo's life here was no loss. But the Dingo had spent his time in isolation while researching the Bureau's database and knew that getting the attention of the upstairs was just more entertainment for humans. Shortly after Terrence left the jungle, the Dingo realized that he had been rescued from Coliseum only to fight for a different audience to make money off of him. It seems that there was nowhere in the multiverse for him to escape, and he was fated to be nothing more than the human's pet. Part 13. The Ancient One. When the Dingo was a cub, he'd surrendered to the humans, and it had led to a life of carnage where he killed his friends. He wasn't going to put up with the upstairs using him in the same way again. Tetrasirini had never lost a fight in his life, and it was his sheer force of will that had allowed him to live for thousands of years. The Dingo god had fought or trained every day since his birth, and he won every fight. Even if his opponent was tough, he would rise to the challenge, and the Bureau didn't stand a chance against him. For him, the callers were a perfect compromise, a peace offering from the assistant director, letting Tetrasirini finish his mission and stop carrying the burden of being the protector of an entire planet. The rise of the net had given conspiracy theorists the need to speak to him, and he had only hoped they wouldn't be too disappointed when they finally met him. A regular Dingo with a few tricks up his sleeve. His long life had taught him patience in the same way that his physical training had increased his stamina. He had known that he had to stay in shape both mentally and physically because no matter how long he lived, he was still one day closer to his death. It was a given, but surely the Bureau would recognize his innate and imposing fortitude. His time on Savania matured the Dingo greatly, and even though he knew he could break from the Bureau by force, he didn't have to if he didn't want to. They did, after all, have families to go back to.